What was the craziest reason a teacher at your school got fired? Story 1. A history teacher I had in high school gave us a lot of random documentary/movie days, during which she would just sit in the back at her desk drinking tea. The year after I graduated, she had a movie day, and when the film ended she didn't get up or do anything but sit there, eyes closed. Fearing the worst, some students went to the office and brought an administrator down who found she was passed out drunk. They found bottles in her desk. Story 2. Our AP Calculus teacher in high school had a mental break, ranted for an entire class period about some nonsense, then drank an entire bottle of salsa, stormed out, and never came back. They had a substitute for the rest of the semester, which was unfortunate since the sub wasn't a calculus teacher, so they were at a disadvantage for the AP test. Story 3. Our teacher was a chronic liar and lied about having a master's and a degree. Funny thing is, she actually did have a relevant degree that would have got her the job. Other lies include dating Brad Pitt, being an ex-gang member, and even being a multi-millionaire but just enjoying teaching. Story 4. 25 years ago, at my all-boys Catholic high school, a priest was accused/caught molesting a student. Of course, this wasn't a firing offense for a priest back then, it was just hushed up. The guy was creepy as hell. Earlier this year I read about him in the paper, a fresh round of allegations. He was allowed to keep on going for another 25 freaking years. Story 5. In high school, FL4P, our teacher took us canoeing. Instead of checking the weather, he brought 15 freshmen into the channel our school was on. A severe thunderstorm hit, and our teacher paddled safely back to school and left us teens in the water. We tied our canoes together and rowed back to school, but we were drenched and super late. Our teacher was just standing on the dock, not a care in the world. He got fired like 2 days later. Story 6. My middle school history teacher, Mr. Lewis, used to invite me and some of my friends, all girls, into his room before classes. Since otherwise we had to stay in the incredibly cramped hallway, this was desirable, especially when he let us play with Cleverbot on his desktop. Mr. Lewis was pretty weird. He only ever wore velvet suits with pocket squares, and sometimes he'd randomly start crying in the middle of class. Weirdest of all, he'd make us listen to his love poetry, dedicated to his dead wife, who we later learned did not and had not existed. In retrospect, that love poetry was definitely for us. Specifically, it was for one of us, my friend, Ruth, who looked notably younger than your average 12 years old. He'd always ask her to write notes on the blackboard and stare at her while she did it. The rest of us noticed Ruth was Mr. Lewis' favorite, but it didn't strike us as that weird. Well, one day, it was only Ruth who got to school early, the rest of us didn't come till later. She went into Mr. Lewis' room, and I guess he tried something. Luckily, I don't think it got very far. He was put on leave. They brought him back a year later. Fun. Story 7. A student teacher who was coaching cheer gave a girl pain meds, narcotic, without a prescription or permission from parents. She got fired. Never heard if she managed to get a teaching license after that. Giving meds is usually not allowed because it's a liability issue. Everyone is perfectly allowed to bring their own pain meds that are over the counter or prescribed to them and take them, but the school can't dispense them. Also, the real issue here is that the pain meds were not over the counter, and they were prescribed to the student teacher, not the cheerleader. It's pretty uncool to give a kid opiates without permission. Story 8. Back when I was in high school, I had a history teacher who looked like Santa Claus and for the most part was a cool and funny dude. He made jokes most of the class and kept it pretty entertaining while still being informative. Well, one day there was this tall curly-haired 9th grade kid who was being loud and obnoxious in the hall, and so Santa teacher went out and asked him to stop as the kid was disrupting his class. Kid didn't listen, so he stepped out of the class and asked him nicely to stop talking so loud in the hallway. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the kid said to him, but whatever it was caused my teacher to lose it and punched the kid right in the eye and held him against the locker like the stereotypical bully does to the nerd in TV shows and movies. Kid ended up with a black eye and broken nose, and my history teacher was soon fired after that. Turns out my teacher had a bit of a mean streak that popped up every blue moon. Apparently, He almost fought a bus driver who was about to leave a student who was running late from their last class. Story 9. He threw pencils at students. One day he threw a chair at a girl who annoyed him. Serious anger management issues. And then they found the child pee on his computer at school. Rumor was that he had also been grooming one of the student aides. I haven't heard a thing about him since the year he disappeared. Story 10. Didn't get fired but should have. 9th grade, room of angsty teens gets a new English teacher. Mrs. Redacted. This English teacher likes 3 things: Jesus, pouring pills down her autistic son's throat, and in rice. During class, when talking about an assignment, a couple students talked about a student who attempted suicide and the teacher had enough. She got up and explained how to properly cut your wrists to a whole class. What an educational experience. Story 11. Probably not that crazy, but a history teacher who made explicit commentary/jokes directed largely at female students on multiple occasions. Showed multiple R-rated films that had nothing to do with the curriculum, without getting parental consent. This was 6th grade, so we were 12 years old or so. He also really liked to talk about the Nanking Massacre. In graphic detail. Especially the S parts. Complete with pictures he put up on the projector. He devoted multiple days to it. I never got confirmation that that was what got him fired, but that was everything that I had documented with times and dates, and brought up to the principal very shortly before he was never seen at school again. Story 12. He left his laptop open in class while teaching and a student found child porn on it while trying to play a prank. Cops promptly found stashes of the stuff at his house when they investigated further. Was arrested and is now in prison as far as I know. He taught students aged 11 to 16, organized a student choir, and was even the main teacher for some of the younger classes. This was well publicized in the local media at the time. Not just a vile nonce, but a dumb one at that. Story 13. Guy wasn't my teacher, but I was a student while he was at the school and he was fired after I graduated. Teacher taught on of the higher level sciences, and after class he noticed one of his students left a notebook. He opens it to look for a name, and eventually finds one, but not before he comes across a draft of a suicide note. Teacher has been around for many years and is tenured, so he decided to try and confront the student and help her get help. The student is a junior, 16-year-old girl, and tries to convince her to go to therapy. Girl wants to and tried to get her parents to take her, but parents won't because they think depression and mental illness is BS. This made the teacher make the executive decision to cross the professional/personal line and gives the girl his cell phone number and tells her to contact him when things get bad and he'll be an ear to listen and give the best help he can. Parents get word of this and tell him to cease contact with their daughter, otherwise they will escalate to his superiors. Teacher tries to convince parents to listen to daughter while he has their ear, but they won't listen, claiming it's just how teens are, and she won't do shit, so they don't feel the need to take her to get help. Well, girl reaches out to teacher on a particularly bad day, and teacher talks her off the cliff again, and parents found out. Teacher gets fired for unprofessional relationship with a young female student. Teacher gets shunned and vilified by community because it's assumed he diddled a teen girl when in reality he helped a girl survive long enough to find help when her parents left her on an island to suffer by herself. As much as I hate that the teacher was punished for helping save a life, the relationship between himself and the student was indeed unprofessional, as it was too close and the parents had told him to stop. He should have gone to his supervision for school-sanctioned advice so he could help the girl and cover his own ass. Story 14. She was the nicest teacher in the shittiest school in my area. Taught 10th grade history. My class was particularly very bad to her, though she also told me her other classes weren't great either. She was made fun of because though she was in her 30s, she had short and choppy gray hair. And her being nice all the time led to kids getting away with more than they should have. One day after a bad class, my class came in and started bullying her again. She had already clearly been crying, and that day she had enough. She spent that day telling us that she has a very rare form of brain cancer. Showed us pictures of her just a few years back, with her husband and deceased child. Even then, some of the kids in that class had no empathy and thought it poetic justice for a teacher to get cancer. That was her last day. I hugged her on the way out. I was a shy kid, didn't really talk much, but I wish I had said more. Unfortunately, she has since passed away.